get in my head, I'm like, Asher, Gelman. You know what I mean? Like I could like totally. Here we go. Welcome to the latest episode of Authenticated, an active listening space inviting you to a playground of creative conversations. I'm your host, Kate McLeod. I am insatiably curious, and I love optimizing my creativity, especially my creative thinking, because it leads me to creative solutions. It's a method of my creativity I practice and share out loud to inspire more independent thinking in a world pushing conformity. So join me with an arsenal of creative thinkers, from multi-hyphenate artists to entrepreneurs or niche experts willing to think out loud with me as I continue to explore and define the creative conscious. Still sounds hot, right? Asher Gelman, welcome to the Authenticated podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I've been following your work for so long. I found it to be so intriguing because it's a space that I get to leave with a new thought every single time.
I love that.
Yeah. I was first introduced to your work for Scarlet Dreams. And then since now you have Afterglow going, and then I got invited to your invited rehearsal of Zionists, which was incredible.
Thank you.
Talk about what it's like to see your work in the world right now.
I mean, look, it's amazing. I moved to New York 10 years ago, and Afterglow was kind of the first thing I did when I got here. It was the first play I ever wrote. I basically moved to New York in January 2016 and then got to the point where around April, I was like, I'm a director and I know how to write and I don't know what I'm doing in this city. Like, I should probably just take a playwriting course and see what happens. And like, Afterglow was that playwriting course. The very first exercise I had was one of the central scenes in the play. And then moving that from page to stage was a whole thing in itself. I had never written before. So I had this finished play sitting on my computer, and a dear friend was like, you should have a reading. And I was like, it's finished, but it's not like other people finished, you know? And he's like, well, yeah, well, that's what a reading is for. So you can understand what you need to do to get it there. And so we had this small reading in our apartment, just invited our friends. And then I caught the bug of being a playwright, because suddenly like these people in my home were like, they were laughing and they were gasping and they were crying over like these characters that I had like made up on my computer based on, it was based on something that happened to me. It always starts that way. And then you sort of embellish and you turn the volume up and you weave other things in and but like, suddenly there was, because, okay, like I need to put this on stage. How do I do that? Sent the play out to like 40 different general managers. Only one got back to me and it was like, I think there's something here, like let's meet. And that was Evan Bernardin, who then was responsible for putting up the original off-Broadway production in 2017. The show ran for a year and a half and then has been like all over the world. We've done our production in LA in 2022, London in 24, and then I just got back like days ago from our Australian production, which is currently in performance in Melbourne, and then we moved to Sydney at the end of the month.
You're going back?
No. The show.
The show is going.
The show is moving to Sydney. I'm not going back because I have to be in Miami for the next one, which is The Zionists, A Family Storm.
Your writing does such a good job at presenting all sides of something. And in one of the reviews that I was reading about Afterglow, it was saying that your focus is on relationships and not so much the facts. Can you speak a little bit about making the space for conversations that are difficult but are centralized around the people having them?
I think ultimately theater is always about relationships. That's why we go to theater. Like it's relationships. It's generally ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And we as audience get to watch them play out situations and conversations that we don't necessarily want to be having or want to be participating in. But that's the catharsis of theater. I think for me, what is so fascinating about theater as a means of exploring ideas is that many things can be true at once. And again, in this day and age, especially when it comes to like the social media of it all and the way we love to flatten things, like we love to look at the world as like there's an absolute truth and that's it. And this is the one thing that's true and this is the way that's true. And that's not accurate. There are many things that are true at once. They are often feel like they are conflicting. I mean, that is humor, by the way. Humor is all based on multiple truths happening at the same time, and our brain goes like, "Oh, that's," and that's why we laugh, right? Because it's funny, because it's like, "Oh, this is true, and this is true," and like now I have a fuzzy feeling in my brain, and then haha. And so, what I love so much about using the medium of theater is that you can put all of these ideas into all these characters' mouths, and then like really allow the audience to absorb all this information and then decide for themselves, like, how do I feel about this? I hate it when someone is trying to tell me how to feel or how to think. For me, it's like, I always lean all the way out. When I feel like someone has like a message for me that is like, you need to think a very certain way about this, or like come away from this feeling this way, I lean all the way out. It's when it feels much more like an invitation, right? When it's like, hey, like, I'm going to give you the opportunity to experience all these different facets and all these different sides of an argument or an issue or a conversation. And then you get to take away from it what you will.
Yeah.
I think that's what I aspire to do with my plays and with the characters in my plays, that they all have to serve a function. If they don't, the character gets cut. The character either gets cut or I double down and I'm like, okay, well now I need to justify this character's existence.
Yeah.
Because for me, I just think that theater is one of the few forms that we have where we truly are being asked to take ourselves out of our constant distraction, or like we put our devices away, and then we're in it. We're in the room with everybody else, and we're all focused on the same thing. You know, that doesn't happen anymore. Even when it comes to like television and movies, those scripts are getting dumbed down because of the understanding that someone is going to be second screening anything that's not a screen, right? So like, I'm watching this movie or this TV show while I'm on my phone, you know, and I'm doing this. So now the characters, like, there's no such thing as subtext anymore, because now the characters have to say and do exactly what they're feeling, because I don't have the mental capacity to be on my phone and also understand what's going on here on the screen, especially if it's complex, especially if it's like asking me to lean in and focus and pay attention, you know. Mm-hmm. With theater, we get to still do that. Yeah. It's one of the last places we get to do that. And I'm very grateful that, like, you know, for me, so like began our conversation when we were talking about my newest play, like the Zionists, A Family Storm. And that play happened because in the first couple of weeks after October 7th happened, like I was very much involved in like the social media conversation of it all, and then realized like, this is just a performance. Like, there's no conversation here.
Yeah.
Everything is getting flattened. Everything is getting simplified. It's not about the most informed voices. It's about the loudest voices, which often know the least. Again, it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like, it's a popularity contest. We get our information from the people who are the most popular, not necessarily people who are the most informed. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was this moment of like, I am not going to participate anymore in the social media of this all. I'm going to watch this play out. I'm going to take a shit ton of notes. I'm going to have conversations in person with the people I want to have conversations with. Mm. And I had a lot of conversations that I fantasized about having with various people in my life.
Oh.
And finally, just shy of a year after October 7th, I decided to put all of my thoughts down into this play. And that became the Zionists, A Family Storm. And it was so cathartic for me to be able to be in that space because of being able to put all these disparate arguments on stage and having responses to them and being able to see all the different sides and all the different facets of like what is truly a very complicated and complex issue. Anybody who's going to try to tell you that any world event is simple, it's lazy. It's laziness, because it's like, well, I'm not going to do the homework and the research to actually like educate myself on this or to glean more information than like, frankly, what the algorithm is telling me to think.
Yeah.
Even with the algorithm, right? Like, you pass total judgment based on the click of a finger. You either like something or you don't.
Yes.
You know, that's the conversation. Because even when we're sharing things, we're not sharing our thoughts. We're sharing somebody else's thoughts, you know? And so it really removes us from the equation, and we're participating in it, but we're not. we have this sense of entitlement when it comes to comfort. We feel that we are now entitled to feel 100% comfortable all the time, always. And it means that we're no longer able to have conversations with people we disagree with. We're no longer able to have conversations about subjects that make us uncomfortable. I have friends who teach in university. They say that on average, about half their class doesn't show up to class because of the content they'll be reviewing in that class, because of course the syllabi must go out in advance. And so, if we're going to be dealing with violence or sexual trauma or abuse or any number of issues, that is a trigger. And I would like to remove myself from that conversation. And what that means is ultimately like that, being able to sit in your discomfort, it's a muscle. And if you don't use it, you become allergic to discomfort. I remember being able to have conversations with people I fundamentally disagreed with on a myriad of issues and still like understand, okay, like we can have this conversation. I think also so much of it has to do with the fact that, especially when it comes to this social media, right?
Yes.
Like it used to be that we had like our identity, which was like more or less fixed, but also kind of shifting. And then we had our opinions, right? That was a totally different thing. But now because of the way we like brand ourselves on social media, our opinions have become our identity. So now if you have an opinion that differs from mine, well, then you are against my identity. I take that personally. I can't have anything to do with you anymore. And so we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing a lot of, oh, well, if you don't agree with me on this point and this point and this point and this point, you should unfollow me, or I'm going to block you. I'm going to remove you from my life. And like, let's play that tape to the end, because the polarization, I think, is the thing that scares me the most. Like the idea that like we are being told to be pushed further and further into our corners. And we still share space with these people.
You're still in the same room.
You're still in the same room. Like, again, you can't just have a roommate that you can pretend doesn't exist. At the end of the day, like we have to be willing to have conversations with people we disagree with, because otherwise there really is no future for us. When you have people who become further and further apart, they stop seeing the humanity in each other. We were on this study tour. The play is about the Holocaust Museum being gifted an album in 2007 from Auschwitz that only depicted the perpetrators and how they dealt with that. So lots of questions about like ethics and morals and whatnot. Is this an album that should be in the museum or not, et cetera? Anyway, point being, we went on a study trip with the team behind Here There Are Blueberries in May. We were in Berlin and Krakow and Auschwitz. And what was fascinating to me was not so much the 1940 to 1945 of it all, when it's just the Holocaust and just killing and genocide. It was actually the 1933 to 1939 of it all, when these people who were friends, neighbors, our grocer, our butcher, the paper boy, like how they went from being full members of society to being deported and then being sent to ghettos and concentration camps and death camps. And ultimately, it is this idea of othering, right? Like, truly the worst thing that we can do to each other, especially as social animals, is to other. Because once othering begins, that's when we start to strip away somebody else's humanity.
We lose empathy.
We lose empathy because suddenly, these people who think this way or who are this way, well, they don't deserve to live anymore. You see it now also on social media, like who deserves to die and who deserves to live, and how that happens is fascinating to me, because ultimately you realize like, oh, actually it has very little to do with morality or morals and much more to do with, did this person agree with me? If so, they deserve to live. But if they didn't agree with me, well, then they deserve to die. It has very little to do with like actual like ethics.
Yeah, it's actually very fear-based, because this drive and this like lack of patience for the immediacy of a decision why do you think you know so much that you get to make a definitive decision? That's fear-based to me. That's to come to a conclusion so that you feel comfortable again, because discomfort to me is essentially just what you don't know. And that's okay. I think that there's actually a lot of power in not knowing. I think there's a lot of power in not knowing yet, like we talked about earlier, with someone not having an opinion just yet.
I mean, it would be so wonderful if we could normalize not forming an opinion because I don't know enough about this subject to do so. I feel like we're also like in this moment of we're supposed to be outraged about everything all the time, always. Am I supposed to be outraged, about what the government is doing? Am I supposed to be outraged about this casting announcement? Like, what am I supposed to be outraged about right now? And everything's at an 11. And at some point, it stops being important. Your system can't handle it anymore, and you just zoom out.
Which is that. That result is another tactic. That is one of the tactics of making something so loud, of making it so much. It's not a smart idea for us as a human species who have this newly invented device that has changed our relationship with time, with our need for immediacy when that never existed before.
With attention, focus.
Consuming. It's changed so much. So it's really interesting for this new thing that is going to completely change the trajectory of our species and what's going to happen from this point on, to say that, pause, let's look at what's actually happening here, because we're all getting marionetted a little bit.
We don't retain information anymore because we can write it all down. How many times have you plugged in an address that you knew how to get to? Sometimes it's literally a straight line. I just need to find the number. I'm walking on the street for 15 minutes in a straight line, and I still feel the need to punch in the address and follow the directions. We don't retain any information. We don't remember anything anymore because all the information we have is in this device. I mean, again, we are all cyborgs right now, whether or not we care to admit it, because we cannot survive without the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens when in that moment when you drop your phone, right? And in that moment when the phone is falling from your hand, that panic of oh God, what's going to happen right now? I hope it's going to be okay, because if it's broken, what am I going to do? Hopefully I'm within walking distance of an Apple store.
Literally.
But if I'm not, what am I going to do? I don't know where I'm going after this. No, truly, I have to look at my schedule. But I remember knowing my schedule. I remember having phone numbers memorized, addresses, just knowing I walk this way all the time. I don't need to punch it in. I don't need to see what's the quickest way to get there. I've lived in the city for 10 years. I know where everything is. Why am I still doing this? Because we developed this dependency on the technology.
And because that muscle goes away of needing to remember. As soon as your brain learns an easier way to lift something, it's usually going to lift that easier way. Do you remember where that came from? The joy that you find in making space, what that is for you?
I've always been fascinated by discomfort. I've always been fascinated by differences in people and the different approaches and just different experiences, the understanding that every single person on this earth has a life that is just as layered and complex as mine. When you actually think about that there are currently 8 billion complex human lives on this planet, I mean, it starts to blow your mind up a little bit. But understanding that and how we negotiate all of our needs and still find a way into society, for me, that was always, I loved that. I love the challenge. I love having a really great conversation, a really great debate, especially with somebody who I know I'm never going to come to terms with. I know I'm never going to fully meet that person where they are. But the fact that they're willing to have a conversation anyway, which to me feels like it's an art that we are losing, the ability to have an uncomfortable conversation. That's fascinating to me. I love it. And so I want to create that. I want to create curated situations, curated arguments where I decide this is kind of the spectrum of sort of acceptable positions I'm going to have on this issue, because you're always going to have the most extreme, but that's not where the nuance lives. That's horseshoe theory, right? The further you get, the closer you get together. And, and then, they're fascists on this side, they're fascists on that side, right? But okay, but in the center-ish, where can we have that conversation among people who are not trying to kill each other? but who may fundamentally disagree. And how do we have that conversation? And what happens when we do and what comes out? To me, I love the act of like being able to put those pieces together and sort of figure out, okay, like, well, this excellent point was just made. Like, what would be like the best counterpoint to that? Rather than like sort of like coming on one side of an issue and sort of positioning the other side as being like dumb and uninformed. Like, what if they're not? What if the other side, whatever that is, actually has all the information? What does that conversation look like? And that's what I always try to do. I don't want to give the answers. I want to ask a whole bunch of questions, and I want audiences to figure out for themselves what their answers are.
What's your relationship like with judgment?
Oh, I'm very judgmental.
I love that.
I'm exceedingly judgmental, and I save my judgment for like my nearest and dearest, because like I always sort of treat it as like, if this were to be printed on the front page of the New York Times, like how would I fare? You know, so like when I'm being very judgmental, right? Like I'm talking to my family, like I'm talking to my nearest and dearest. I'm talking to my partner, my husband, you know, my closest friends, sometimes my cats, you know. But I think that's also like, that's part of it. Like, I think we should be judgmental. There's the difference between being judgmental and acting in a judgmental way.
Yes.
And you know, and so like for me, like I'm never gonna, unless they really fucking deserve it, I'm never gonna intentionally make someone uncomfortable. But I'm gonna be judgmental. I'm gonna be catty. Like I have a very specific experience of the world, and like for me, yes, there's a right way to do things. But I also appreciate that my experience is very different from other people's experience. So I'm not going to meet anybody at a moment where I believe that they need to understand my experience without my having to sort of lay that out or explain it. I do think that we are in this moment where it's like the rallying cry of our generation is like, it's not my responsibility to educate you, which is like, oh yeah, it actually kind of is. Because again, play that tape to the end, right? Like if it's not your responsibility to educate me, then whose responsibility is? It's my responsibility, right? Where am I getting my sources?
Yeah.
Where am I getting my sources? Okay, like you want me to know something, right? But you want me to have done the correct research.
Yeah.
With all due respect, there are 8 billion people on this planet. I do not have the time, nor the energy, nor the willingness to pre-educate myself on all 8 billion people on this planet, because I might have an interaction with you at some point in my life. You're gonna have to meet me halfway.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel. Like I just feel we need to have just so much more grace for each other. Nobody else has our experience. So if we want people to understand our experience, we have to be willing to share that. We have to be willing to talk about it. We have to be willing to make ourselves uncomfortable to be able to pull other people in. Otherwise, we're just muting and blocking and silencing. There's just no path forward that way.
That willingness to go into the discomfort to me is like the willingness to learn more, because you get more out of that, right? And
absolutely,
it's nice to know more, because then you know more of what to do. Your knowledge of the world and your perspective of the world just continues to become more dynamic. You talked earlier about, you said something along the lines of putting these words in the characters' mouths, and also the space in your first reading of Afterglow in your home with these near and dear people in your home with you, laughing, crying, like experiencing these feelings. You write these things down. They get read out loud by a different person. What's your relationship like to your writing voice, words you hear, and like the way that you listen and the way that you write?
So for me, like I've spent my whole life in the performing arts. Like my parents always talk about how like I never met a microphone that I didn't fall in love with, you know?
I know that feeling.
I remember apparently at my cousin's bar mitzvah when I was like very, very young, at some point just like wandering up to the microphone and just giving, I don't even know what I said, just giving a speech because it was there. You know, I must have been like 5. Apparently it was very adorable. I don't remember any of it, but like I do know that everyone was mortified that it was happening, and apparently nobody stopped me. So luckily, I guess I wasn't too inappropriate. I very much came to theater as a performer first, theater and dance. I double majored in college in dance and theater.
That explains the movement parts of your pieces. Okay.
So for me, the way I approach my characters, I have to actually like become them. I will have these moments when I'm like writing a character where I'm in it and then like I'm very emotional and I'm writing the words that I want to say as this character and I feel this person. They become real to me. I think for me, I have to find a way into all of my characters. I have to love them. I have to see them as like parts of myself.
Ooh.
Because if I don't, then I risk using them just as props and not as fully formed individuals. This comes down to sort of the idea of like, I need to justify the character's existence. Mm-hmm. And if the character is just there to be a plot point, it doesn't cut it for me. So like when it comes to like the words, right? Like the words, they come from me, from this moment of like, in this moment, like being the character, understanding what the character's wants and needs are. How do I get that? When it comes to this character, like what tools does this character have? What tools does this character lack? You know, because we are all quite imperfect beings. And so like there's the thing that we wish we had said in the moment, and there's the thing that we actually said in the moment.
Yeah.
And so for me, it is about like, I love teeing up my characters, like putting like this one like word choice in the mouth of a character and then having another character like seize that one word and be like, oh, I'm going to say this instead. Like knowing that like I've set that up. But it's also funny because I just ended a very intense rehearsal process for Afterglow Australia. And especially in like the early weeks of rehearsal where the actors are still getting off book, like there'll be these moments when like they will say the line, but they'll miss a word that doesn't seem like it's an important word until they realize like, oh, but now the other actor can no longer respond to that word that I didn't use.
Because it's needed.
It's needed.
Yeah.
So I would say I've always been very good at segues because I've always been very good at like turning the conversation to what I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. Being able to do that with characters. Okay, I need to get from this topic to this topic. Like, how do I do that? Is it a turn of phrase? Is it a double entendre? What word is going to get us from this idea to that idea?
Okay, so much just came up for me there when you talked about the channeling of the characters, and earlier you had mentioned judgment is reserved for your nearest and dearest. With these parts of you that you are using to create and that you fall in love with and that you see as parts of yourself and you embody, with what you share and put on the page, what is your relationship with intimacy like? Like what is intimacy?
It's interesting because I've been doing a lot of talking about intimacy over the past month because Afterglow is so much about like intimacy and trust and loyalty and passion and companionship. And intimacy for me, it is this idea of like when someone is deemed safe, right? Like when like, okay, like I can share these parts of myself with you. It's like this quiet understanding, I think, when it comes to intimacy. For me, I get very intimate with my writing because ultimately it's all parts of me. It's all ideas that stem from me. Like, again, like the characters I write, like I have to find a way in. Mm-hmm. I think for me also like growing up gay, and I was fortunate enough to be able to come out at 15. So I didn't spend like a whole lot of time like really like figuring that out or in the closet or anything like that. I was very grateful for that. But until I figured it out, I was really lonely. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that there was a part of me that I hadn't addressed, and people can sense that in you. People can sense when you're not whole with yourself.
Yeah.
I felt quite alone, quite ostracized growing up. And then like when it came to college, and then after college, I moved to Tel Aviv. I lived there for a decade from 2006 to 2016. And then like moving here and like building community and understanding, oh, there's a difference between like acquaintance and friend. Even though like the language of social media tells us that we have like 3,782 friends, we probably only have about like 7. If we're really, really
if you
lucky.
really are honest with yourself.
If we're really lucky. We have like
very
7
lucky.
friends. And like friends to me are like, these are people who like, you know, you can rely on, people who would drop everything to help you. And everybody else is just a close acquaintance or further removed. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's great. We should not be trying to be friends with everybody. But like with that, like, yes, there's this intimacy of like, hey, like you've made it into my close circle. I'm going to share these parts of myself with you that I'm not going to be sharing with everybody. And understanding like what parts of yourself do you want to reserve for who? Again, like right now, and I know I keep bringing up social media, but it really is this other reality that we have. There is the physical reality of our world, and then there's the digital reality. And for many people, especially today, the digital world is the most important one. It's more important than the physical world. I know a lot of people who run their lives based on like, what is the best time to post? And like, what tags do I need to put? What content do I need to have? Like, who are my collaborators on this? If that makes you happy, great. To me, that sounds exhausting. But then it becomes this thing of like, I have a following. And in order for me to maintain that following, there are certain parts of myself that I need to share. And then at what point are you sharing everything? Do you have intimacy with hundreds of thousands of followers? Why do those people get to have access to that? Again, because we've monetized our identities and we've turned them into brands. And like we stop interacting with the world as humans. And now it's about the brand. Now it's about getting the right shot, the soundbite, or the 240 characters of text that are going to cause our followers to feel a certain way.
Yes.
Hopefully grow our following, grow our influence, grow our power. It's all about power, right? Because it's attention. How many eyes are on me at any one moment? How many people are listening to what I have to say? It has very little to do with the actual content and everything to do with the attention.
Result-oriented.
Result-oriented.
It's interesting, too, that when you say that, I think about the currency of in real life, in real time, but then the currency of attention. And it's very different, like digitally versus in person, because everything's curated to a degree. Like even though you and I are sitting here and this feels to me right now like a very real conversation, we still have 2 cameras, we still have 2 microphones.
Not even that, like, again, you woke up this morning, you didn't look like this.
No.
I woke up this morning, I didn't look like this. So like, it's the edit, right? It's like, it's, taking a shower, putting together an outfit, fixing our hair, makeup, etc. What did I eat today to prepare myself for this moment? It is the edit. It is curation. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think right now what we're also dealing with is like a lot of people wanting us to see the unedited version of themselves. And like, I don't know, at some point it gets a bit much.
I don't need to see everything.
I don't need to see everything.
It translates to like the braveness, right? Where it's like, well, look how brave that is because it dares to be different. And I'm like, well, that just to me is daring to be human.
I think in many ways we've really lost our humanity because of the digital world, because of these devices, because of the way that they feed on our attention. I mean, watch any documentary about social media, about these devices. Every single person in those documentaries who knows how this stuff works, who knows how it's coded, they don't let their kids anywhere near it because it's designed to be addictive, because it's designed to pull you. I mean, I am so grateful. I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s before we had all of this. These kids, these poor kids who live their lives on social media, who won't take a chance to do anything for fear of it being labeled as cringe, because once it's on the internet, it's there forever. It's there forever. And we're seeing that all the time. We're seeing, people paying like real life consequences for stuff that they posted on the internet when they were like teenagers. I'm so glad that I got a chance to make mistakes before the world got a chance to see those mistakes. I got to make a lot of mistakes that like would be cancelable offenses today. And luckily, when I was making those mistakes, everybody around me didn't have a camera ready to record it. What's worse is like now it's not even about the real footage, because now we also have to deal with the fact that any information that is delivered to you digitally, you have to question. Even if it's photographs, video, you have to question whether or not it's real.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's been doctored. I mean, yes, we had Photoshop before, but now we have like full AI, and that stuff's only going to get better. There used to be a time when like photographic evidence was enough. Now that's not,
not the case.
But again, we're never asking ourselves, is this true? Is this real? Should I do further research? In fact, there's still only one day a year when we start to use critical thinking when it comes to the news that we get, and it's April 1st.
Didn't even think about that.
It's the only day where we're like, is this real? Is this piece of news real? Because it's April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not real. And I do the same thing. I see one person say something on the internet, and I'm like, oh, well, it must be true.
When did that happen? Growing up, my parents were they were 100% against social media. We weren't allowed to do AIM. What was before Facebook?
MySpace,
Facebook, like all these things.
Well, there was also Friendster.
I've not heard Friendster in forever.
I know. It's like these ruins that are living somewhere underneath Facebook.
Yeah, that's the artifact that you find, when you go.
Friendster, and you would leave testimonials for your friends. You'd be like, Kate is this wonderful person. We recorded a podcast together. She was fantastic. I loved her so much. We would leave testimonials to like basically vouch for people.
I'm like, you Yelped your friend.
You would Yelp your friends, yeah.
Wait, okay. It's almost like the new tech is always like so shiny and exciting. And because it's new, there is this automatic association with the best. New is not synonymous with the best. It used to be Google it, and that would be the answer. But then Wikipedia started coming out more and more as like people are like, oh, who can be a contributor to that?
Everybody.
Everyone. The internet is made up of all the thoughts. Everything that has been written down or recorded or somehow captured, that is what makes up the internet. The information's on the internet. But now it can't just be April 1st. It has to be anything that you consume. It has to be who's saying this, why are they saying it, who's paying for this,
who's making money. Who has the time for that? Who has the time to like feed every article into that process? We no longer have our trusted news sources anymore.
No.
Even the news that like the Washington Post is getting decimated. We used to have, like, for better or worse, we used to have a shared reality. The news would report whatever it decided was worthy of reporting, right? Mm-hmm. And that was the information that we all had. It was in the newspaper, or was it, 7 p.m., right, on TV. We all live in completely different realities right now because my algorithm is vastly different from your algorithm. My algorithm is even different from, like, my partner's and my husband's. I think that's another thing, like, we have to hold space for and really have grace for the idea that like we want to say like how can you come to that conclusion based on the shared information that we're both getting, but that's not the case because you're coming to your conclusion based on the information that's being pushed to you. Correct. I'm coming to my conclusion based on the information that's being pushed to me, so of course I'm going to have my opinions about it. And then when you have your opinions about the same thing, or what I perceive as being the same thing, and they're different from mine, the question I ask myself, like, how could this person reach these conclusions based on the information that I received? It was like, well, because they didn't receive that information. They received completely different information. Mm-hmm. We are all living in completely bespoke, completely disparate realities. Again, because of these digital worlds.
When you get into the nitty gritty, like when you get into one of those really heated debates and they're like, that's not what happened. This is what happened. Da, 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 da. Everyone's right. Because you have your perception and you have your narrative. And who am I? Because this red, that's red to me. That's red to you. But I don't know how you perceive that red.
It's the same thing with vocabulary, right? Like when I say I love you, right? I say the word love, which is my very specific definition of love. Mm-hmm. So when I say that to you, you don't hear my definition of love. You hear your definition of love. And maybe it's similar, maybe it's very different. And I think that's when we really run into the most trouble, when we're using the same words to describe things that are actually very different to us. But we've used that word. That's a shared word, so it must be a shared thing, but it's not. Mm-hmm. The point of communication is not having said the thing, it's making oneself understood. We love to do this thing, especially like when it comes to like our loved ones, right? And it's like, but I told you this, or but I said this. And it's like, yeah, you may have said that. You may have used those words, but that's not necessarily what I understood. So I always feel like it can get a little annoying, but like the idea of like, say it back to me. What did you understand me saying to you? And being able to clarify. Again, this idea of like, well, I said this to you. I used these words, so you must have understood it. Like litigating the exchange that we had based on the words I used versus the words you understood. Yeah. Like that's how we get further. The point of communication is to make oneself understood, not just having said it.
The example that I'm thinking of now is the Zionist family storm.
Yeah.
That was a tool that you used there. Mm-hmm. So much. I, even as the audience member, was like, you're not hearing each other. Your ability to play so much and be so malleable in all these ways. Mm-hmm. Now I just want to know about your process into getting into these characters and how you write. And the fact that the bug bit you a decade ago and you're like, this is what I'm going to commit to. I want to know.
So my process is incredibly irresponsible because my partner, Steph, with whom I work, a lot of anxiety. He's the executive director at Midnight, and I'm the artistic director. So my process is as follows. I'll like marinate on an idea for as long as I marinate on it. And then when I get to the point where it's like, okay, gun to my head, I could write this thing. It's not going to be great, but it's going to have like a beginning, middle, and end. Then I schedule a reading about a month out. I invite all of my people. And then about 2 weeks prior to the reading, I start writing. And I write exponentially more every day. Usually the final 48 hours is just me not sleeping and just writing all the words as fast as possible because I have extreme ADHD and I really need the pressure and the social pressure of like all of these people have committed to coming to my reading. I can't just ask them to come a week later. And I can't just show up and be like, I'm sorry, I only wrote 20 minutes of material.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be worth their time because anywhere, but especially in New York City, the greatest sin you can commit is wasting someone's time. Time is our only truly universally shared resource because $60 to me can mean very different than $60 to you, right? But an hour, those 60 minutes belong to us equally. Now, again, we don't know how much time we have left. You know, like I could get hit by a bus as soon as I leave this place.
Nope.
Hopefully that's not going to happen, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But like time being the most truly universally shared resource, when people commit to your thing, you can't waste their time. And so for me, the terror of having a reading that is not worthy of people's time is what forces me to write a play.
That is such a gorgeous knowledge of yourself.
So I create deadlines for myself because I'm never going to be that kind of person who's going to sit down for like 2-3 hours every day and just write. It's not who I am. I need the pressure. I just won't function without the pressure. That's why I love like workshops. I will meet frequently with our director, Chloe Treat, who's wonderful. And she'll give me assignments and then I have to show up the next day with new material. Like even in a development process, like I get terrified of walking into that room with actors and not having like pages and pages and pages of new material because this is this process that is devoted to helping me develop the work, helping me like take it to the next level. To not take full advantage of that at every moment is a waste.
Yes.
These processes trick my body into the panic of like, I have to write this thing. And then I get my best work done. I mean, my production company is called Midnight Theatricals because that's when I would get my best writing done at the witching hour when like there were fewer distractions. When I realized like, okay, like I have to bang this out because at some point I have to wake up, but I also have to go to sleep. After midnight would be the time that I could, because it's just a little quieter. There's fewer distractions and I'm quite easily distractible.
It's a brilliant understanding of your creativity. It also has bandwidth for you to just make up the rules for yourself instead of thinking that, well, a successful writer looks like 2 to 3 hours every single day at their writing desk with their tea and like whatever that might look like.
I mean, that might be a successful writer, but that's not this one. I could never do that.
Was it easy for you to find this process for yourself, or did it take a long time to arrive to it?
I pretty much like figured it out kind of immediately.
That's great.
Which is fortunate. Just because otherwise, like I just wouldn't work on a thing. I found I would have like months to work on something. I wouldn't touch it. Just because, you know, I have tomorrow. I always have tomorrow, but you don't have endless tomorrows. And so creating deadlines, creating situations where like I have to get the work done now. Because if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. That's just the way I figured out how to work. It's not for everyone. And it causes me a lot of anxiety, but I use the anxiety. The anxiety helps me. The adrenaline helps me. The fear of not having enough material gets me to write.
Like not enough to play with almost.
Not enough to play with, but also like if I'm in a development process and I need to work on a scene and I show up the next day and like, oh, I changed these 3 lines, you know, like fuck off.
What are we really playing with?
What are we doing? What are we doing right now? Like I love a development process because I get to really experiment. Like I get to write brand new versions of things. Even when it came to like Scarlet Dreams, for instance, Scarlet Dreams was several vastly different plays that ultimately I ended up weaving together to be one play. Scarlet Dreams originally had nothing to do with artificial intelligence. Scarlet Dreams came from the height of the pandemic. I got really involved with virtual reality fitness. and particularly this app called Supernatural VR. And I started developing like a parasocial relationship with their lead trainer, this woman named Leanne Pedante. And I knew what it was. I knew it was a parasocial relationship because like this woman would show up like in my living room 2-3 times a week. And she would coach me, but like it was pre-recorded. It wasn't a conversation, but like this was this person who I would see in front of me regularly. And I was using this app for about a year. I also like followed this woman on social media, and we would have like light exchanges, but like it would be this thing where like, oh my God, like, you know, like because this woman who like, she was my friend, but I was her stranger. And I knew that. Her husband died in a car accident. It was tragic. And suddenly I had all these like complicated and complex thoughts and feelings about it, because like I could see that she was in deep pain, and I so wanted to help her, wanted to like reach out, but I also knew like I'm not one of her people. Like I'm not one of the people that she's going to come to for any of the things that she needs right now. But I felt a need to be there for her. And then I realized like, oh, like there's something here. There's something in this feeling that I have, especially in this day and age when like, again, we were talking about the social media of it all. We have these influencers, right, who are sharing like every aspect of their lives with people who they don't even know exist, right?
They never will.
Again, like these people are my friends, but I am their stranger. So like the very first iteration of Scarlet Dreams really more explored the idea of like influencer culture and like who we present ourselves as digitally versus the reality. And like in that scenario, like Scarlet was always real. She was a real person, but the difference was that like who she was in real life was very different from who she presented herself as like online at the brand. And that was the big betrayal that Kevin had to deal with in that version, which that when he discovered who she was in actuality, it like broke him. And that was the version we were developing for a little while. And then there were 2 articles that I read kind of back to back. One was about this man who had formed a relationship with someone who like it turned out wasn't a real person at all, or rather it was a catfish situation. And then the other was this influencer who had licensed her artificial intelligent likeness so that her fans or her followers could converse with the AI version of her, and she monetized it. And I had this moment, I was like, oh, that's what this play is. It's about artificial intelligence. And so then Scarlet became AI. And then that was the conversation. But like, even with that, there were like 3 disparate versions of the play that then ultimately I wove all 3 of those together to create what ended up on stage. But it was this moment of like being in a workshop and being asked to take all these chances and write different types of scenes where like, okay, like I have this one version of the play and now I have this brand new version of the play that I don't even feel connected to anymore. We went back and we read the first version of the play, and then ultimately it was like, okay, like these are the things that I'm missing from the first version of the play, and then just weaving them all together to create what ended up on stage. But like that was part of the development process where like I felt like I was losing the play. I was losing my connection with it. And then ultimately like realizing like the connection in my play was through my personal experience, which was this parasocial relationship that I had with this woman, Leanne, and how that affected me. And that was my in to the play. Scarlet Dreams is very far from reality, but what was real, the spark that created it, was this parasocial relationship with this woman who barely knew I existed.
When you talk about that, like as time goes on, like your connection to what the immediate fire is that starts the engine of that play, how did you phrase that again?
Oh, I just meant that I was writing different versions of the play, and I got to the point where I was writing versions of the play that I no longer felt connected to. So for me, it was about how do I weave back my initial connection to the play back into it, because I no longer relate to this material. It's getting too far removed from what interested me to begin with to writing it, and then finding a way back in. Because listen, I've had a play stolen from me before through a process, and you know, it was incredibly painful. But it was my play Safe Word. It was in 2019. It was the height of identity politics, and it was this moment where even though these were my characters that I absolutely made up, whoever was in the room who was most closely identified with the character got to be the authority on what the character did. The play got just really sanitized, and it ultimately like wasn't what, like, you know, the characters weren't even allowed to say offensive things to each other anymore. And it just became something that I no longer was connected to. But I also it's funny, I almost left the industry.
Because of that.
Because of it. It just felt really gross. It's also something that I allowed to happen. I have to take full responsibility because I was directing that project as well, and I had written it. And I was at this moment in my life where I believed, oh, if I could learn how to work with this difficult person, I can learn how to work with anyone. And that is so not true.
Not true.
Now I'm very much of the mind of if we can't work together, then we can't work together. And that's fine. That's totally fine. I don't need to learn how to work with everyone. Mm-hmm. I need to learn who I want to work with and continue working with those people. And if I no longer want to work with those people, I stop working with those people.
Yeah.
But again, say it was my second play. I just didn't know enough. I learned a lot of very valuable lessons on that production.
You're bringing up a really interesting thought that I'm having, which is the weaponization of personalization. When things become so personal to you, it becomes almost your weapon. Mm-hmm. But then when everyone pulls out their swords, you're just at a standoff. So it's what really actually happens.
Yeah.
As time passes and you write these beautifully poignant spaces and people who make real-time conversations happen out loud, what's it like to revisit them? They're permanent. You write them down, they become the play, and then you are someone who strikes me as very much an active participant in your own evolution. You love to continue to grow and expand. Mm-hmm. So what is it like when these things live as the snapshots of that time and what you did right then?
It's interesting because they do and they don't.
Okay.
I think all of my plays will probably be finished when I'm dead. I'm a living artist. Every time I work on a thing, I update it. I wrote Afterglow a decade ago, and we just did our 4th production of it. I'm still updating the play.
That's so cool.
I'm still making changes to it. We're not talking about tectonic shifts or anything like that, but the idea of I have knowledge that I didn't have 10 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 2 years ago, that now can be folded into the work. And so for me, if you can make a thing better, why not just do that? So I love the fact that, again, it's not a movie, right? It's not a time capsule in the same way. In the way that yes, Afterglow will always take place in New York City in the summer of 2017, because that's when we opened it. It makes sense to keep it in that moment in time. Mm-hmm. As I glean a much more nuanced understanding of my own life, how relationships work, I'm able to imbue the text with that and elevate the piece further. That really excites me that every time I get to revisit a thing, I get to update it.
That honors the human nature of it, mm-hmm. of where it continues to evolve. That honors so much of you, the human living artist, going back and saying, oh, and then this is where it went, as if it never stops, as if the love that you put into these characters that you do love, you're always going to love them. That sounds like an unconditional promise from you.
If I wrote them correctly.
If you But, to go back and give them more. And has the cast changed over the past 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a new cast. Every time a new actor enters a role, it fundamentally changes it. It's so interesting because you get to see how different chemistry shifts things, and maybe for this version or for this cast, I need to lean into this element more, mm-hmm. or lean out more. Also, when it comes to Afterglow itself, when I first wrote it, when we first did the first production, I made sure to tell the marketing people hey, this is not a play about polyamory. I want polyamory very much to not be part of the conversation. Because at the time, I didn't know that I was engaging in polyamory. At the time, my husband Mati and I, we had a partner, Tony, who we're still very close with, but is no longer our partner. But it was this thing where we were refusing to name our relationship. And I remember one time, Mati and I were riding the E train, and I was like, we're poly, right? And he's like, we're not. And I was like, okay, but Tony is he's spending the night once a week, and we kind of do a lot of things with him. This is a relationship.
Yeah.
You might not want to call it that, and I don't quite know why, but you're absolutely participating in it. So finally he relents. He's like, okay, maybe we're poly, right?
Yeah.
But this happened already after Glow had closed in New York. Fast forward 5 years, we're doing the production in LA. And my partner, Steph, is out there with me. And, we're living together out in LA for 5 weeks while I'm doing the show. And this was before he was working with me. But like, even with that, like my understanding of polyamory had shifted dramatically. And because of that, like I got to really fold that into the characters and make it actually more part of the script, because understanding where the character Darius came from, who is basically the third in this relationship. It's the play is about Josh and Alex, this gay married couple, and they have a threesome with this man named Darius, and that begins the play. It explores like the new intimate connections that begin. And it was interesting because when I was doing the LA version, it was like, okay, like what? While like the character Josh is based on me and the character Alex is very much based on Mati, like Darius is a real fabrication, doesn't exist in the real world. But being able to see that character through my partner Steph's eyes allowed me to fold that awareness into the character. And what would he lose if everything ended? And the idea of like, it wasn't just the relationship with me, it was the family that we have, the three of us. And so like that got imbued into the character and into the play itself, and really leaned into the idea of like these three men as this modern family, which I really try to stay away from in the first production. And now I'm really leaning into, and it becomes an exploration of polyamory without really taking aside, because ultimately the play is much more about like communication and trust and like what happens when that breaks down than it is about like open relationships or polyamory.
In one of the reviews I read of it, what intrigued me about it and why I wanted to ask you about intimacy earlier is because I think that to assume that intimacy is just sexual is a cheapening of what intimacy is. It's one angle of it, but it's not everything. And I've always been really attracted to the number 3 because of its imbalance, but also because of its strength when all points come together, like in a triangle. It kind of sounds like there's this beautiful collaboration, conversation constantly happening at all points of your life, whether it's personal or it's professional.
I love collaboration. I love being wrong. Don't tell anybody in my family about that.
I will not.
I love being wrong. I love changing my mind based on new information. I love trying things and understanding that when they're not working, I need to try something else, rather than doubling down and continuing on that path. Like for me, something I love about like my family structure is like my husband Mati and my partner Steph and I, like we're not like a traditional throuple. I have romantic relationships with both of them, but they do not have a romantic relationship with each other. But we very much operate as like a single family unit. We make all important decisions together. There is something wonderful about these moments when the two of them are in agreement and I'm not, because then it's like, okay, like the two most important people in my life are in agreement about something. I'm on the other side of this. I must be wrong. Like I have to be wrong. Like that's kind of the way we operate. Like if, yes, most of the time the three of us are in agreement, but when it's like 2 versus 1, that's really freeing actually, because ultimately like in more traditional couples, like it's 1 versus 1 and then we're sort of equally balanced, right? Versus like the triumvirate, you're going to get an imbalance, and the imbalance is healthy and the imbalance is helpful also.
Structurally, it's always going to be imbalanced, right?
Which is great. I think we love to like always look for balance as like the thing that's going to sustain us. But I think it's actually imbalance. The imbalance is what helps us like grow, and it pushes us, challenges us in ways that balance doesn't. When it comes to relationships, we love to talk about relationships in terms of successes and failures. Your relationship is successful if you're still in it, and it has failed if you're not. It's an unhealthy way of looking at relationships because it forces us to stay in them when we shouldn't. For me, at least, the rubric I use to measure success or failure in relationships is whether or not you learned anything, whether or not you evolved. If you're the same exact person you were coming out of a relationship, then yeah, you failed. Like, even if you were moving in separate directions, because you evolved, because you became different people, that's the success. We really live in this world of like relational hierarchy where like there are the people who are partnered and there are the single people, right? And the single people, it's like with the 8 billion people on this planet, you couldn't find one person that could handle this.
Yeah.
We make compromises. Sometimes we make too many compromises to stay in a relationship because we do not want to be perceived as being unlovable. And that's not what it is.
No.
But what that does is it creates a misunderstanding of what loneliness actually is. The loneliest thing in the world is not being single. The loneliest thing in the world is sharing a life with someone you no longer connect with. And I see this all the time. I see couples who've been together for 50 years.
And should not.
And they're just around each other. They just got used to each other. And I think that that's really sad, but I also get it. I get that we're pressured into it. We're, you know, this idea of like locking it down with marriage, right? Like the idea that like I have to put in the effort till we get married so I can preserve the way we feel in this moment forever, as evidenced by this wedding band, you know, and then I don't have to do any work anymore because I locked it down. I did it. I did the thing. Like, no, we always have to be working. Like one of the lines in Afterglow is love is easy, relationships are work.
Yeah.
And they are. And like we love to equate love and relationships as being the same thing, that if the love is there, the relationship should be easy. No.
Definitely not.
No. It is constant work. The funny thing is with polyamory, I think it gets a bad rap for being like commitment light, because it's like, oh, you actually don't want to commit to anything, so you're like keeping your options open. It is the opposite. It is not commitment light. It is like AP commitment, because you are managing multiple personalities, multiple schedules, multiple needs, and that all has to be considered.
I would assume massive amounts of capacity and also massive amounts of communication, because when there's multiple channels, doesn't mean that you give 50% communication to one and 50 to the other.
No.
This balance does not exist.
Balance doesn't exist. And also because like different people have different needs and different capacities. Like my husband Mati is an only child. He grew up with a rich internal world. Like he was more than happy to entertain himself growing up. Whereas for me, like I grew up the oldest of three. All of us were vying for attention all the time, always. We were never alone. We never had to be alone. And so one of the big points in Afterglow was my not being able to understand at the time that like, while I needed constant attention and like passion, Mati needed space. He needed time to like recharge his own social battery. And like for me at the time, I was like, why can't you like take the energy that I'm throwing at you? You know, like I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. And like, and it's so interesting, like, again, like revisiting the play now, because here are these things that I just fundamentally did not understand a decade plus ago when it was going on. And now I get it. Like, oh, like my husband gets to be the best version of himself when I give him the space to be that version of himself, which is like not something I understood before. And I got incredibly offended by it. Like, well, why wouldn't you want to be around me all the time, always doing everything? You know, I'm a lot. I know I'm a lot. And I know that like there's a certain amount of bandwidth that everybody has for me. You know, once that threshold is crossed, sometimes just people need to take a break from me. And it doesn't mean they don't love me. It doesn't mean they're not committed to me. Because ultimately, every relationship we have with other people is a polyamorous relationship, because our relationship between the two of us, right? It's my relationship with you, your relationship with me, my relationship with myself, and your relationship with yourself. And we have to make space for all four of those relationships. And the thing is that I just didn't understand about Mati at the time was that he was trying to prioritize his relationship with himself, and I wasn't allowing him to do so because it was taking him away from me. I didn't have that understanding of relationships at the time. So I just felt like hurt.
Yeah.
I just felt hurt and rejected. I don't anymore because I have that understanding, but I didn't at the time. And that's what got me into trouble.
Everyone gets the manual in a toolbox, like at birth, right? But to assume that we're all going to fix the sink the same way, to assume that we're all going to do something the same way, or it's jarring because it means that our perspective is not the only one. It also means that our perspective is not the only right one. But to be like, oh, this person's recharging looks like solitude and mine looks like more peopling.
Yes.
Well, two truths can be...
Yes, many things can be true at once.
There we go.
For me, like that has been the thing that I've so enjoyed about living and like experiencing life and evolving and growing and being disappointed and having my ass handed to me and being triumphant too.
Yes.
You know, like my successes are directly linked to all of my failures and vice versa. Life is messy. People are messy, and we know that we are messy. And I just wish we could extend the same grace that we extend to ourselves to other people. we love to judge ourselves by our intentions and everyone else by their actions. But we never stop to ask what their intentions are. And the truth is like, I always say like 95% of the time someone is being inconsiderate, it's because they are literally not considering you. That's not something they're doing to you.
Yeah.
They're just not considering you. My grandparents got together because they were both at a wedding, and my grandmother was sitting in front of my grandfather, and she was wearing a very large hat. Now, whenever they would tell this story, my grandfather would talk about how large the hat was, and my grandmother would talk about how the hat wasn't actually that large. But like he tapped her on the shoulder and asked her to take off her hat so he could see. And then they ended up getting married. I mean, not right immediately. There was obviously conflict at first. But like, she didn't wear that hat to obstruct his view. She wore that hat because it was beautiful on her. We just need to have more grace for the fact that like people are not doing it to you. They're just not considering you. We love to think that like people are thinking about us all the time, always. No,
they're not.
No one's thinking about you. They're too busy thinking about themselves. I'm thinking about me all the time. I don't have enough bandwidth to think about you.
That's where the personalization makes it the problem. When it's like, well, you're being inconsiderate. Well, why don't we look at that as like a physics issue? You're in motion or you're not in motion. There's nothing negative or positive about that. It's not saying that being considerate or not being considerate. What I'm just saying is the state that you're in right now is something I'm not enjoying. And it doesn't have to be a huge personal thing, attack, or...
And not everything has to be like a capital C confrontation. Having spent a decade living outside the United States, like I get to have this superpower when it comes to Americans because I'm able to separate the American experience from the human experience. Americans are not able to do that because the way our media truly centers the American experience as the human experience. I always tell Americans specifically, like, please, for the love of God, spend at least 6 months of your life living somewhere not in the United States. I was fortunate enough to have a very good education. And it wasn't until moving to Tel Aviv that I learned the names of like international leaders. I didn't know who Angela Merkel was until I lived outside the United States because we don't have international news unless it is international news that directly affects the United States in some way, shape, or form. We just have the national news. And then we have the local news, which is like our state or our city. But like we don't really learn about what's going on in the rest of the world unless it affects us directly. That is starting to shift a little bit now just because of social media. But again, it's algorithm centric and it's centering you and your thoughts and your feelings and what makes you angry, what fills you with rage, and it feeds you more of that.
Because misery loves company, and so it wants you to put it. But this I-centric narrative, it's interesting. I've lived outside of the U.S., but I think that my interest in investing and my interest in understanding the global market has actually been my understanding to understand how insignificant our contribution is there. And especially in the political climate that we're in now, when you hear people beating their chests and talking about how powerful they are, that usually is a huge sign that they're not. Because powerful people typically don't have to tell you that they're powerful.
They just are.
They just are.
They just are. It's an interesting time. It's a sad time, I think, for me. I've lost a lot of friends over the past couple of years. A lot of people who I had a lot of respect for, I lost a lot of respect for. Sure, a lot of people feel the same way about me. And that's okay. There was a time when I cared more about that. Now I care a lot less because the truth is that like I'm fortunate enough that the people who are close to me are still close to me for the most part. But I do feel like we're just moving further and further away from this idea of a shared humanity. And empathy is just, it's running thin. Something that was fascinating to me in the wake of October 7th was like, I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli as well. I lived there for a decade. And something that people don't understand about Israel is that it's a family. Like if you feel like it's a family there. And so when October 7th happened, it wasn't just like, it's not like a school shooting here. We're like, oh, that's so terrible that happened to those people that I am completely removed from and have no connection with. On October 7th, my Facebook lit up. Half of my feed was searching for people. I was fortunate enough that I did not know anyone directly who was killed, but I knew dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people who did. And the grief that the country felt over this pogrom. But not only that, the way that it was received. I learned about October 7th through progressives who were justifying it on the internet. That's how I found out about it. It was very much this idea of like, well, what did you expect what was going to happen? And I had to barter empathy. In order to receive empathy for what happened to my people, I had to prove myself. It was, how do you feel about a ceasefire? You know, how do you feel about what's going on in Gaza? And I would have to prove that I also felt terrible for Palestinians.
You had to qualify your
I had to
empathy.
qualify it in order to receive any empathy. It was very much this idea of like, if I had lost a parent, right? And it's like, well, what about all the other people who lost parents? You know, how do you feel about them? I was like, well, I'm sure it's very sad for them. And I definitely understand what they're going through. But like, I'm not focused on those people who lost parents. Like, I'm focused on my parent that died.
Living my experience.
My experience. But like the fact that it was this idea that like our pain couldn't be felt. There was no space for it because of ideology. It happened to us. And awful things happen to other people too. That's a conversation in and of itself. But the idea that in order to receive empathy, I had to prove myself willing to empathize with other people, even though it wasn't the same. Like, these are my friends who are going through something awful, and strangers are going through something awful too. I'm feeling my friends, and I should be allowed to feel my friends. It's not a justification for other pain. We'd lack the space to be able to have empathy unless that someone is proven worthy of having empathy. This is part of our conversation that we had earlier. It's very clear that like some people deserve to die, some people deserve violence, and other people don't. And it just kind of depends on who we've decided is deserving of that. When are we okay with executing people in the street? Look at like Luigi Mangione, or like what's going on with ICE, you know. Again, executions in the street, like no judge, no jury, nothing. And they are received very differently. Why is that? It's ideology. Mm-hmm. These people agreed with me, and therefore they're in the right. These people disagree with me, and therefore they're in the wrong. It's really that simple. And it shouldn't be, but it is.
But you can't simplify many truths at once.
No.
And people tend to like less work.
Well, we're lazy. We're really lazy.
Very
lazy. We again, it's easier to be told what to think than have to figure it out for ourselves.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, your speaking voice, your writing voice, your thinking voice, all of it. I really enjoy all of it. So thank you very much for sharing it on here.
It's my pleasure, really.
Where can people find you, follow you, stay up to date with what you're doing?
There's always Instagram. My handle is Dancing Asher. Also, my company, Midnight Theatricals, on Instagram, Midnight Theatricals. We also have a website, midnighttheatricals.com. I also have a website, sashergelman.com, which I mostly update, but sometimes forget to. This was such a pleasure, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asher.
And those are the latest thoughts. Thank you for sharing your thinking space with me today. I hope you're continuing on with new questions, answers for now, thoughts and curiosities of your own. Please like, subscribe to, and share anything and everything that resonated. Send me questions and intrigues that my creative work or this episode brought up for you. For all things that I'm working on, creating, and exploring, head to the show notes. Until next time, babe.